So this is another thing that I've been considering making a video about for a while, and then I keep talking myself out of it. Sometimes you kind of feel like you might just be pointlessly drawing more attention to something or someone who might just be better ignored, but I do really want to know what you think about it. So here we are. Today I want to talk about a comedian who, as far as I know, is not actually disabled himself, but who frequently makes jokes about disability and disabled people. I think there is an interesting discussion to be had about who gets to tell jokes about disability, and also, is it almost offensive or infantilizing to kind of say disabled people are off limits? Oh no, they're much too fragile, we can't joke about them. Or is making jokes about disability when you yourself are not disabled, is that pretty much always punching down? Are you just reinforcing stereotypes, misinformation, negative biases that a lot of people already hold about disabled people and autism specifically? The comedian in question is Matt Rife. He did some TV stuff in the past, and then he's had a lot of success on TikTok. He has 18.8 million followers over there. As a result of his success, he landed himself a Netflix special called Natural Selection that came out towards the end of last year. It caused quite a stink when it came out. He opened it with a very tired domestic violence joke. He also said some things about disability, but we'll talk more about that a little bit later on in the video. He will actually be gracing Netflix with 2 more specials. One will be coming out next month, and it's going to be completely focused on his crowd work rather than stand-up, as the last special was, which is kind of more his thing and what he's known for on TikTok. So speaking of crowd work, the first thing that I want to take a look at is Matt Rife's most viewed clip on TikTok. It's called Awesome Autism, and the caption is, "They really are better than us in every way," followed by that lovey, smiley, heart emoji, I don't know, the warm and fuzzy emoji, and then the like smiley, teary-eyed emoji, which I mean, to me personally, I find pretty patronizing. It has the same vibes of some of those Facebook-styled autism memes. I have a video from ages ago reacting to them, and there were, you know, the standard autism is a superpower, and then also there was one that was like, autistic people are angels who fell from heaven. That doesn't necessarily sound like a good thing, but okay. It's like people sometimes feel like they need to go overboard in order to compensate. No, autistic people are not pure or perfect or better or angels fallen from heaven or otherwise. We're just people, and that's enough. That should be enough. But let's not judge a clip by its caption. Let's have a watch of the video. But before we do, this portion of the video is sponsored by AccuFlow. AccuFlow is a digital planner and calendar app designed to give you a sense of control over your time and reduce overwhelm. AccuFlow integrates tasks from tools such as Gmail, Todoist, Notion, Slack, Asana, and puts them all into one universal inbox. I've been experimenting with time blocking recently because my life has been pretty chaotic. I found out that I can no longer live in the flat that I've been living, so I've had to try and fit in like going to property viewings and all that kind of admin into my typical work day, which has been quite a lot. I'm at a point where I just really need to keep myself focused. I can't afford to procrastinate. Otherwise, you won't be getting a video each week. So this is my AccuFlow. I can drag tasks from my inbox into my calendar, quickly add new ones using the command bar shortcut, and they have lots of other keyboard shortcuts here. And I can categorize everything with projects, tags, and color coding. Tasks can easily be repeated, so things like breakfast will appear on my calendar every single day. Now, anybody who knows anything about me knows that I don't really like to keep a super strict schedule. I like to plan my days, but I like to see it more as a suggestion. Luckily, tasks can be easily snoozed and dragged around, rescheduled. You don't have to be super rigid with things like this. You can just use your AccuFlow calendar in whatever way best fits your productivity style. AccuFlow also has this daily rituals feature, so you can review your day with a shutdown, and you can also block out tomorrow with daily planning. The layout is super simple and clean. If you do find yourself confused by anything, AccuFlow do offer a one-to-one onboarding productivity call, so you can ask them any questions that you might have. If you do want to try AccuFlow yourself, they're offering 30% off for 12 months. Just use my link in the description below, and I really hope you find it useful. Okay, so back to Awesome Autism. Let's take a look.
Does anybody here have any autistic children? Do you really?
Yeah.
How old?
So he just turned 4.
He just turned 4. What's how far on the spectrum would you say he is? Is it little by little, or is he like?
He's nonverbal.
He's nonverbal. He got it.
Yeah.
What's his thing that he's really good at?
So he's hyperlexic.
Hyperlexic. What's that?
He's very, very good with numbers, shapes, colors.
He's good with numbers, shapes, and colors. Fuck yeah, that dude about to rob a casino someday. You're gonna be a very rich mom someday. There's no cons, bro. You don't gotta worry about him talking to strangers. You don't like talking to nobody. That's awesome. Congratulations.
opened the comment section both on TikTok and on Instagram, I was quite surprised to see no criticism. I think it was just entirely positive, basically. I mean, Chloe Hayden did say screaming at this, and I am interpreting that as positive. Someone replied and was like, is that in a good or bad way? Sorry for asking. I assume that's in a good way, like as in it was very funny. That's how I would take that anyway. So I can see why a lot of people have responded positively to this. Matt Rife focused in on strengths in a world that is so keen to see autism as disordered and wrong. So I'll try and unpack why I think this clip makes me feel uncomfortable. I think part of the discomfort is that kind of internal cringe and squirm you get when somebody starts talking about something that you know quite a lot about, but that you know most people are pretty misinformed about, and you know has the potential to be offensive as well. The thing is, if you don't know a lot about something, you'll probably get stuff wrong or find yourself relying on stereotypes, which I think is what happens here. Matt Rife asks how far on the spectrum is he? Is it little by little? And then he says he got it, and then she agrees, yes, he's got it. And this is a super common misconception that autistic people are hit with, smacked with all the time, that you can be like a certain quantifiable amount on the spectrum. That some people are less autistic, they've just tiptoed on a little bit, but some people are all the way over there and they're very, very autistic. It's more that all autistic people are autistic, they've all got it, because otherwise they wouldn't have been diagnosed. We all have different strengths and weaknesses, we all have varied support needs. Some people might seem like they're really not all that different to neurotypical people and they're very competent with their speech, things like that, but then they may end up being hospitalized at some point in their life and detained in a mental health unit, as unfortunately many autistic people are in the UK because they're experiencing things like autistic burnout and autistic meltdowns. There are many autistic teenagers who really, really struggle with eating disorders and again can end up hospitalized. Being autistic can affect you in lots of different ways outside of the stereotypes that we're used to seeing in mainstream media. And then Matt also makes the assumption here that this son will have this one thing that he's really good at.
What's his thing that he's really good at?
Which, as I say, I'm glad he made it a positive. And yes, lots of autistic people do have things that they're really good at. I have so many talented people in this community. I'm not going to sit here and argue for how untalented we all are. Some autistic people are savants. That's somebody who has a neurodevelopmental condition or another neurological difference who has an area or areas of complete genius. You may have seen people who you can tell them a particular date and they can say what day of the week it was. But around only 10% of autistic people are savants, which means 90% of autistic people are not. Now, autistic people can also have special interests. We can often become intensely focused on things. That can lead to becoming very, very good at those things. That is true. But not all autistic people do have an incredible skill, and that's okay. I worried a bit when you put her on the spot like that. I was like, oh, what if she doesn't have something to say? What if nothing comes to mind, you know? But I mean, like, she is a mom. I'm sure she could think of something to say, you know? But you don't have to have one area that you're exceptional in to be autistic. You don't have to be super intelligent to be autistic. I wouldn't want any autistic people to hear this and then feel less autistic because they can't pinpoint their one thing. This sentiment continues in Matt Rife's Netflix special though, and personally, I feel like it gets more uncomfortable. So to set the scene, as I said, this special opens with a domestic violence joke. Matt goes with a friend to a restaurant and is served by a waitress who has a black eye.
We couldn't get over the fact that we're like, this is the face of the company? This is what you have greeting people? And my boy who I was with was like, yeah, I feel bad for her, man. I feel like they should put her in the kitchen or something where nobody has to see her face, you know? And I was like, yeah, but I feel like if she could cook, she wouldn't have that black eye.
And what made this joke quite confusing was until then, Matt's audience had been mostly women. That was kind of a thing, like him flirting with women in the audience, and they'd bring him gifts and cookies and t-shirts with rude slogans, and he'd remove his belt with one hand. So to suddenly open with, haha, get in the kitchen and make me a sandwich, it was a choice. It was a choice that was made by Matt Rife. He then says he's testing the waters with that joke.
Testing the waters, seeing if y'all are gonna be fun or not. I figure we start the show with domestic violence, the rest of the show should be pretty smooth sailing after that.
Which is like a great way to excuse bad jokes, I suppose. If nobody laughs, you can just say people are being too sensitive. It's their fault that they don't find you funny. But about 15 minutes into this special, we do start talking about autism again. He mentions how if women have a child later in life, they have a higher chance of having a disabled child, first to lunch, as he calls it. He then goes on to say that this is not necessarily a bad thing because I actually think it's kind of cool to see the way God works. If you pay attention mentioned, God always finds a way of evening things out. God will always replace a negative with a positive. Anytime you see someone who is born less fortunate in a certain aspect, you don't got to worry about that, because God's gonna bless them with an attribute, a quality about themselves. Sometimes even a skill set sort of levels that playing field a little bit. So being autistic is so hideous, so terrible, that God has had to bless us with genius abilities in order to make up for our existence on this earth. Almost like an apology for putting us here a bit wonky. What if we just said disabled people, autistic people deserve to be here regardless of any talents or skill sets that they have? What if they could exist without having to be exceptional? What if there is nothing to balance out? Does it work that like the more talented you are, the more disordered you're allowed to be? But of course it doesn't actually work like that. Of course not all autistic people struggle equally. We're all an assortment of talents and struggles and everything in between. Matt continues, I noticed it first in my nephew Chase. He's autistic as F, which is probably not the medical term, but he got it for sure. So that one's back again. He's non-verbal, that's his thing. The phrase non-speaking is preferred by a lot of people. Unless you are his mom, he won't speak to you, no eye contact, he won't acknowledge you're in the room. It's pretty rude. So there we are, potentially reinforcing another stereotype that autistic people often have to deal with, that we're rude. That's his symptom, you know, just the one. But get this, his blessing is that he can paint. Even as a teenager, he paints better than any art teacher I've ever had. I just think it's cool to see the way that God always finds a way of evening things out. It's really impressive to me. So it's all right that he's a bit rude to you sometimes because he can paint. Well, like, what if he couldn't paint? It's like people use the special talents that some autistic people have in order to make themselves feel better. It feels a bit like it's in the inspiration porn neighborhood. Inspiration porn is defined as the visualization of disabled people overcoming what seem like broken and substandard bodies, sensory and cognitive makeups to make the non-disabled public feel good about their unbroken, able bodies, senses and cognition. Even on the first TikTok we watched, the Awesome Autism video, one mother actually commented, my son has autism, shows stems, I think that means stims, seems to get auto-corrected a lot to stems. You see it all the time, and also in like auto captions as well. Stems, she means stims, and so on. But is one smart boy when it comes to building and gaming codes. He's also very good at working out problems. So she kind of says it like he stims, so maybe he rocks his body sometimes in order to self-soothe, to process his sensory environment, to help his concentration. But don't worry, that's okay, because don't panic, he's really clever. And then we can all go, phew, and breathe a sigh of relief, apparently. But what if we don't need the but? Like, what if it's just okay that he stims? She sounds almost apologetic, which doesn't necessarily mean she's a bad person. I just think that's kind of how society can make some parents of autistic children feel, like they almost have to apologize to other people for their child, you know, being weird. And I don't know, maybe it would be nice if people took the time to understand why autistic people stim, why some autistic people might struggle to varying degrees with things like eye contact and speech. Then maybe autism wouldn't seem so scary and disordered, and then maybe we wouldn't feel like we had to make up for it. We don't need to try and see being autistic as a superpower. We can just see it as a different way of being, that has a very unbalanced, very uneven mix of pros and cons. Fern Brady, who is an autistic Scottish comedian, sums it up really well.
Sometimes when I tell people I'm autistic, they try and smooth things over at any cost, and they go, oh, but it's a superpower, don't worry, it's a superpower. And I'm like, really? Is it?
Would it have made a good film if instead of having superhuman strength and being able to fly around the world on a whim, that Superman instead monologued at you about the 1960s poet Sylvia Plath at length with no ability to register your disinterest in
You guys can't get the balance right. It's always either a tragedy or you have to say it's a superpower, and I wish people just viewed it with a bit more neutrality.
And maybe I'm biased, but I do think Fern Brady was much funnier here because she is autistic. She has that lived experience. When you know more about a subject, you know what's funny. When you don't, you end up with outdated cliches and stereotypes, which can be as offensive as they are boring, which I think is a great argument against non-disabled people cracking jokes about disability. Back to the Netflix special. At this stage, everyone is clapping clapping and cheering, or at least the canned laughter is clapping and cheering. This unfortunately transitions into Matt talking about someone who went to school with who had Down syndrome, who was blessed by God, not with painting this time, but with a large penis. He says, "That boy was blessed, man. I still effed him up in dodgeball out of pure jealousy. I was like, you're not even using it." Personally, I do find this joke pretty degrading, and I really hope this person doesn't actually exist and it was just kind of made up for the Netflix special. Otherwise, it could be pretty humiliating. He does use a name for this guy. Hopefully it's not actually his real name. You're never sure with comedians. Was it Trevor Noah who said it at one point where like you can say anything as a comedian and people will assume that it's made up, and like often, you know, things that have happened in your real life are so ridiculous that people, you know, will think you made it up. I sat in wet paint once in real life and it was really bad. Like it was all over. It ruined my favorite pair of jeans at the time. I had a completely blue bomb. That sounds like something that didn't really happen. That sounds like a cliche that would happen in a silly movie, but that actually happened to me. But I definitely feel like this joke does feel like punching down. It feels like the bullies at school picking out the marginalized people in the class, you know? It feels worse that Matt is somebody who apparently I've heard, is seen as somebody who is very conventionally attractive. I'm like demisexual, so I just have no idea. It goes right over my head, but so I'm told. And I feel like this joke can only really be funny if you believe that all disabled people are asexual beings. And if you've seen any of the backlash online that Danny from Love on the Spectrum has received for just expressing while she was on the show that she has an interest in having sex, you see that unfortunately a lot of people do seem to think that way. Disabled people are so often assumed to be children, unfortunately. So again, we're playing into harmful stereotypes here and reinforcing negative beliefs that people already have about disabled people. Not to mention the fact that he essentially makes a joke about beating this guy up during a game of dodgeball. We have women being subjected to domestic violence, and we have young disabled people being beaten up at school. Wow, Matt, how subversive. In this society, we never would have thought it. As I say, people were not happy with this special, with this new brand of sort of edgy, offensive comedy. Matt Rife did issue an apology on Instagram, but it wasn't ideal. Are they ever ideal? No, but this literally was just not an apology. There wasn't a ukulele involved this time.
Matt Rife was getting quite a bit of heat for this, so he posted this to his Instagram story. Y'all can see up top. It says, "If you've ever been offended by a joke I've told, here's a link to my official apology. I clicked on it, and then this popped up, medicaleshop.com/special needs kids. And it took me to a site for special needs helmets. For him to link helmets for children with disabilities, I feel like is the definition of low-hanging fruit.
I don't know, I feel like Matt Rife can put the soppy captions about how autistic people really are better than us in every way and use the love heart emojis all he wants, but I don't really feel like this shows very much respect for disabled people. He's clearly using disability as a way to insult the people who don't find his comedy funny. He could have linked to anything at all. He could have given us a Rickroll. That would have been more fresh and original than a lot of the other stuff he's done. This person on TikTok does mention really liking Matt Rife's crowd work, and this person said that one of the reasons they like it is that everyone is fair game. But I don't know, when I watch his crowd work, I feel like, is it that everyone's fair game, or is he just continually going for low-hanging fruit? Matt so frequently zones in on people who have obvious physical disabilities in the crowd.
My boy in a wheelchair over here? Are you in a wheelchair too?
3 months ago, he posted a video titled, "No Joke, Handicap Crowd Work Compilation." He uploaded that on YouTube. It has 2.1 million views. The thumbnail says handicap accessible crowd work. Now, I've always been under the impression that handicap was a pretty offensive word. I wouldn't personally use it apart from now when I'm reading the title of his video, but you know what I mean. I've seen some mixed opinions from people within the disabled community about this word. I think if I heard somebody say it in the UK, I would find that pretty jarring.
Yeah, there's supposed to be handicap seating up front.
Maybe it's more normal. In America, I did see some people saying it's quite a normal thing in my state, so maybe it differs from region to region. But I get the impression that if someone pointed out that it was an offensive word, he probably wouldn't care and tell people to stop being so sensitive. Matt also does use a slur for disability in the subtitles of this video as well. A lot of the jokes are quite cliche. They're probably things that most of these people have heard many times before.
Everybody shut up already. I can already tell how y'all gonna feel about this, and I'm not gonna stand for it. Neither will he.
He also pretty much always, from what I've seen, asks people what happened to them.
Bethany, what is, if you don't mind me asking, what is your condition? How recent is the eye patch? A week. Oh, this is new. May I ask what happened? Hold on! Do you have one arm? What happened?
A bear.
A bear. A bear bit your arm off?
Which I know is something that people who do have obvious physical disabilities, like being in a wheelchair, for example, it is something they are asked a lot. I can't imagine how kind of tedious that gets. Some people might not mind, but some people might not want to be reminded of what happened to them, or they might just not want to talk about it to a crowd of people. On a Reddit thread about how people feel about being asked and how people respond to being asked what happened to you, someone suggested saying, "I'm happy to share, but why don't you go first? What is the most traumatic thing that's happened in your life?" However, at the same time, as Matt says, the people in the audience are at a comedy show where they know crowd work is a thing that he does. It's his main thing. You know, they kind of maybe know what they're getting in for. This sort of inclusive, in quotation marks, comedy, as Matt calls it in the description, is all over his page.
Shut up! He's at a comedy show. He know what he came for, all right? That's not true. He could totally be here against his will. We don't know.
There's a good chance that at least a lot of the disabled people at his shows are the type of people who do appreciate this sort of humor, who do find this funny, who can stomach teasing and kind of seeing other people being teased a bit more than I can, and that's their right. It's their right to be there, for sure. I don't think that necessarily means there aren't lines you shouldn't cross, though, like using slurs, for example. And, you know, just because somebody smiles and laughs in the moment doesn't mean they aren't uncomfortable with the interaction. I mean, that's obviously not for me to say whether or not someone else was comfortable or offended by the interaction, but I know myself, you know, if I was picked on in this situation, I would definitely struggle to have boundaries and in front of everyone when the spotlight's on me say, actually, no, I'm not comfortable with talking about that. So I might just, you know, go along with it and smile and laugh and then maybe not feel great about it later on. Because, you know, there is kind of quite a power imbalance going on there. It's a weird dynamic. I wouldn't be able to speak up for myself for sure, but maybe that's just me. And obviously Matt doing things like using slurs and words that are outdated in his captions and titles, and also asking disabled people, you know, what happened to you. It may affect other disabled people who wouldn't be comfortable with this sort of thing if, you know, the general public who consume this content think, okay, well, it must be okay. Matt also does this thing where if he finds two disabled people in the audience, you know, two people in a wheelchair, he might compare how disabled they are and, you know, try and imply that someone is less disabled or, you know, like has less right to be in the chair than somebody else. That kind of thing is similar to the whole has he got it with autism, and sometimes that's based on how disabled they look visually to him, which obviously, you know, a lot of people do have hidden disabilities. So again, misinformation that we perhaps don't want to reinforce.
You also have CP? Where? Nicole, don't let her be that cool. Don't let her be that cool. She didn't earn it.
The general sentiment in the comment section of this video is again overwhelmingly positive. I don't care what people say about Matt or the hate they throw his way. No other comedian is out here doing this sort of crowd work and being proud enough to make a whole video about it. I'm blind and have been for most of my life. This literally brought tears to my eyes because for once someone gets that those of us with disabilities just want to be included and made fun of like everyone else. I can't wait to go to one of Matt's shows, meet him and thank him personally for roasting my sorry blind ass. I love you, Matt. Keep doing what you do, it's beautiful, just like your effing face. He isn't treating disabled people like they're made of glass, I suppose, which could be refreshing. And it is interesting how much of this would be acceptable if Matt Rife didn't look like this, which I'm told is a good way to look. He is charismatic and he does often come across as quite kind. He has this nice interaction when someone has a seizure at his show. He stops the show, makes sure this person is okay, goes out of his way. There are moments where I can absolutely see the appeal. And I can appreciate the skill involved as well. I'd be completely useless at something like this, you know, responding to people on the spot. It's maybe the one thing that Matt's really good at. Who knows? Maybe God is compensating for something else. That sounds like I'm making a joke about like his penis size or something like that. I'm not thinking about Matt Rife's penis, although if you watch the Netflix special, it's kind of hard not to because he talks about it a lot. I have also seen some disabled people say they find it more honest for people to acknowledge their disability and perhaps feel erased if someone sort of pretends to not notice that they're in a wheelchair or something like that. I think I understand how it happens. If you live in a community where disability is framed as tragic and inferior, then claiming not to see that so-called defect feels like a favor. We try to extract the disability from the person because we think disability is ugly and the rules tell us this separation is nice. When Matt singles people out. He often does take selfies with them. He gives them a hug. He makes them feel special, and I think that is what people like. However, I do feel like some of the language he uses is a bit patronizing. He'll often use things like sweetie, love.
Oh, who is this? What's your name, love? Nicole. Nice to meet you, Nicole. Who are you here with?
And he's speaking to adults often in their 30s and 40s. I'd hate it if someone called me sweetie simply because they knew I was autistic. I'd love to know your thoughts. Is this what inclusivity looks like? Everybody being roasted? Or is it simply somebody punching down, going for shock value, saying things that a lot of people maybe think about disabled people, maybe want to ask, but they feel like they can't do it? But back to autism, Matt had a podcast appearance a few months ago, and he kept insisting that the host's son was autistic because of his love for cars.
The 7-year-old video games, he likes Roblox, Minecraft. He's really into that stuff.
That's all very normal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Little math whiz. He's a cool, eccentric kind of kid, like great
Autistic?
personality. Not autistic, no.
No, okay. Just good at stuff. Okay.
Just good at stuff. And then the 5-year-old, it's just cars. It is cars.
There's the autism. Got it. Got it.
Cars, cars, cars.
That's so funny. I love that he's nerdy about it at such a young age.
Loves it. Loves it. It is the only thing he gives a shit about.
Really? That's autism, man.
Yep.
100%. Have you had him tested?
Yeah, he's
You did have him tested?
No.
Oh,
No.
come on, man.
No,
I'm
he's
curious.
It does just seem to be a thing that Matt Rife loves to bring up autism. In the first Awesome Autism clip as well, he obviously says, does anyone here have an autistic child? I don't know why this is. Maybe just because he has this autistic nephew that he references in the Netflix show. Maybe it's just on his mind. Or again, maybe it's just kind of for the shock value. Autism is quite a loaded word. A lot of people have opinions on it. A lot of people have not great opinions on it. A lot of people are misinformed but still have opinions on it. I do worry with the fact that autistic itself is being used as an insult, and we have that whole is it acoustic thing online that I have a separate video talking about. I do worry that autism is kind of becoming the butt of the joke. But anyway, he goes on for quite a while about this son potentially being autistic, despite the host being clearly uncomfortable with it. He also refers to the child's interest in cars as concerning, which implies that autism is a negative.
No, he's I don't think he's autistic. He's pretty like because he likes cars that much.
Yeah, man. Too concentrated on one thing is a little concerning.
But in the next breath, again refers to autism as being awesome.
Like he's
Really?
he's either autistic, which is awesome, or he's working on a manifesto.
So it's like, which one is it? Can we pick one? Is it a problem or is it a gift? As Fern Brady says, neutrality would be nice. Also, it would be nice to not try and diagnose someone else's child, especially not on a podcast, and especially not when it seems the only thing you know about him is that he likes cars. The guy has to literally pretend he has cramp in his leg to get Matt to stop insisting about it.
Really?
He's either autistic, which is awesome, or he's working on a manifesto.
Cramp. Oh fuck.
Cramp
Hamstring
right now?
Yeah, hamstring cramp. Fuck.
I'd love to know your thoughts. Would you like to have Matt Rife putting you on the spot to make jokes about you being autistic? I'm not really sure I would. Well, I'm definitely sure that I wouldn't. I've made that clear throughout the video. I wouldn't personally, but maybe that's just me. I definitely prefer listening to autistic comedians talking about autism. And I actually did a community post a while ago asking people for their favorite autistic comedians, so I'll leave that link so you can go and check that out. I would definitely recommend Fern Brady. I also really like Hannah Gadsby, and they have also been diagnosed autistic because yeah, autism can be funny, particularly if you're listening to an autistic comedian. So if you would like to see some extra stuff from me, you are more than welcome to support me on Patreon. You absolutely do not have to, but if you do, you get access to the Discord server, which is an amazing place where you can chat to other neurodivergent people and people who are considering the fact that they might be neurodivergent. You'd only have to join the lowest tier to join the Discord server. I'll leave it linked below if you want to check that out. If you want to stay on YouTube, you might enjoy the video I made recently about the autism charity, Autism Speaks. It's 41 minutes long, so if you need something long to watch while you do the dishes or something like that, that might be a good one. And again, if you want to check out AccuFlow, you can get 30% off a 12-month subscription if you use my link in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video very soon.